colleagues and administration team, I have to apologize. But we have the National Anthem Bills Committee next door. We have to, well, we have like every other day meeting. Sometimes the meetings just overlap. And since we have a lower quorum, so I won't question the chairman's decision of the anthem. Well, I saw that if all three members present went to the national anthem meeting room, that we will have a quorum. I just want to make sure that I can accommodate both. I have to apologize to the administration for wasting their time. Second round, Mr. Shu Cafe. For the Dr. Kiki's Quark's question, you can't answer. Let me tell you how to answer it. Well, the Consumer Council's complaint on beauty services, and then you don't care delivery or not, you should just use quote the figures from the Consumer Council. Well, it's pointless to appeal on emotions and chanting slogans. Well, on the for 2018 to 2017, the complaints on beauty services from 1,147 to 10,500. Well, 45 years ago, it is over 2,000. It seems you see there's a drop. The Consumer Council told me for out of 1,000 complaints, probably over 300, about 300 will be substantiated. And in the same report, for medical incidents, in 2017, we have 703 to 2018, 2,462, a triple fold. You can ask Dr. Kwong. Since we have a sharp rise in medical devices, and a medical council such under Christians shouldn't leave it regulation to others, shouldn't be by legislation oversight instead of self-regulation. We should talk with figures instead of chanting slogans. You see that I'm less excited because I'm quite fatigued and my throat hurts. Well, safeguarding the public health is the top priority. So those devices with huge health risks must be regulated. However, what we're talking about, those are actually not medical devices. By your legislation and your paper, and those the muscle stimulator it must be listed, and within 5 years' time, they will need to produce a medical device report by the home country. If the home country cannot provide a medical report, the product cannot be sold in Hong Kong. It applies to all electrical appliances. I'm talking about the retail market. Well, you said a lot of face roller that use batteries or socket power, and how much injury we know it causes. In 5 years' time, this product will disappear in Hong Kong. I believe they will be available outside of Hong Kong. So for other countries to buy your proposed bill, can you sell this device in Hong Kong? Now that you have this 5-year listing mechanism, the manufacturer and the suppliers have met with me many times and told me that in Hong Kong, for the beauty market, that probably only the doctors will use it. For the beauty devices, the device have never have the medical report, and they won't able to do it either, because when they manufacture this, they have no plan to fulfill the requirements of a medical device. They're just really for the layman, and the product would naturally fade out. So even if we don't regulate them, the products were not able to be imported to Hong Kong, and only the device used by doctors will be imported to the market and become a medical device market. All along they claim that medical devices are not necessarily just used by doctors. They don't plan to regulate the users, just classify it as medical devices. The user can be just you and me and buy in a retail shop. For example, the blood pressure taker and for if a muscle sore, I just tie it up, and which can emit heat of 3 heat levels to relieve my muscle ache. Well, I would say that that would be a medical device, but not regulated at the moment. Well, that I can use it on myself without a doctor's assistance. Well, let me set an example. 2 weeks ago, I see my doctor had to remove a pigment from the laser. Well, it hurts like crazy and like a fire burning. Well, even the nurse winced when the doctor do the laser treatment on me. For the laser equipment, can it be done by anyone, performed by anyone else, not doctors? Since there's no regulation on devices, there's no restriction on the user. I know that there are users who are not doctors using these devices. So that means they can use that? I think you have to explain. Let's say we legislate use on the laser equipment. However, they didn't stipulate that the use that a doctor must be used to apply the treatment. However, while it could be seen as a medical procedure, it should not apply. However, this bill can address this. Let's say the acupuncture needle. You are sure that the needle meets specifications. However, the user of the needle, the acupuncturist, should have been a registered Chinese medicine and practitioner with the relevant training. While the laser equipment must be regulated in future, however, we don't regulate the user. That may be not be a medical procedure. Because some people are using laser equipment for cosmetic beauty purposes. So this current medical device bill will not regulate the user. Mr. Xu said for the listing mechanism in place for 5 years, if they're not able to obtain the home country marketing approval, that means it cannot be registered in Hong Kong. That's not the case. Well, it's not actually registered or not. For the device actually in use for many years. Well, the 5 years is about you listed, and 5 years time they can't get their product registration, then we're not able to be used in the market. Well, the moment it was imported, whether it's in place or not, then once implemented, then the devices cannot enter Hong Kong, not registered. So in 1 decade to 2 decades time, for the older models, well, if been already been imported, you don't regulate them. Let's say if the device changed the model number and certain functions. Well, let's say for the dishwashing machine, they all have the same number and well, we have a third-party accreditation for the manufacturers did not register in their home country. They only export to other jurisdictions like Hong Kong. If they didn't get the home country marketing approval, we have something called a third-party conformity assessment, in which the assessment have been carried out to vouch for its safety and effectiveness on the intended use. The Department of Health would also accept the conformity assessment. I thought you were talking about the registration of medical devices will be hinges on whether the home country will see that as a medical device. So even if the home country didn't determine that as a medical device, however, with your professional knowledge, you see that the same class of equipment as a professional stuff, since you are registering through the third-party conformity assessment. So we're adopting the definition of medical devices overseas as that for Hong Kong. So, well, for food we have the Kodaks, and we have the definition. Well, we have already set out our proposed definition. Well, that's the same definition for our administrative framework. For some device, the registered the medical device in their home country, if they have a market approval, they don't need to carry out a third-party conformity assessment. They can just provide the marketing approval, which will endorse and recognize. Have you checked with the third-party accreditation body and how much a medical report will cost? Dr. Chang of DH? Dr. Chang? It depends on the risk category, whether it's a class 2 or 3 and the complexity. Let me tell you, I heard from industry, well, it actually costs 1 to 2 million, and you also require a clinical testing period. It didn't require more than 2 days. Actually, take more than a year. And just for the Hong Kong market, spending 1 to 2 million alone and 2 years. Well, by 2 years' time, another new model will come up. Well, this device will probably vanish in the Hong Kong market. Was anyone behind me? Okay. Alice Max. Some colleagues said that with the regulation in place, there wouldn't be free of medical incidents. Well, after the regulation, we cannot stamp out all the medical incidents or beauty incidents. Actually, those beauty incidents are perpetrated by doctors. Well, for the DR victims, up to now, their children have graduated from universities. You still talk about whether to regulate. Well, a dance instructor died from a liposuction surgery. Well, her daughter was just an infant and now she was entering primary school, and yet we failed to enact a single piece of legislation. Well, but only just the private healthcare facilities bill. Well, just one bill will not stop this tragedy. However, different legislation must work together. Well, in the market, we want consumers to have access to non-compliant devices, for example, through online shopping.
I agree that with the introduction of these measures, we will not be able to stop the mishaps, but at least we still have to do it. These are acts of the medical practitioners, and they will be handled by the medical council. Now we are talking about the regulation of the medical technology and consultation is being done. Things are moving really at a glacial pace, and I think we need to have a combination of legislation for the consumers to be properly protected. If we drag on like this, the consumers will be exposed to an unregulated situation. Now, there was a question raised a moment ago about whether you will go down the user control path. At one point, you did think about controlling the users. Because of the reverberation, you retracted from it. So do we need to regulate the users? I think we may wish to take this step first and move on to this at a later stage. Third, some said that with these regulatory measures, Hong Kong will will not see these devices anymore. Has the administration communicated with the trade? Is it the case that your standards are so severe, so draconian, that they cannot bring in these devices anymore? Permanent Secretary. Well, if I may address the first two points, and then I defer to the DH regarding the devices that are brought in, whether they measure up to the requirements. I agree with Ms. Alice Mack that at the moment we do have big loopholes. In other jurisdictions, they are tightening up the regulation regarding medical devices, and they are subject to a licensing regime. In Hong Kong, they don't have to have the registration, and these devices are imported into Hong Kong, and if we do not enact legislation, then Hong Kong will become the dumping ground of all these devices that will not guarantee safety. In terms of user control, we've never given up on this, but it's not the right time. So we have to build a consensus for this to happen. Like other jurisdictions, they have a separate treatment in this regard. As to the requirements of the devices as a result of the regulatory measures, defer to Dr. Zhang. Chairman, we've been meeting the beauty sector on many occasions regarding the devices, and we have streamlined the requirements, like if they can produce the registration documents from South Korea and other jurisdictions, we would accept these documentation. In South Korea and the mainland, they do use these devices. Now, for devices, if they cannot even get the approval, we don't want to see them imported into Hong Kong. So as a result of the refinements to the proposal, I hope that the devices that can measure up to requirements can be brought in. But Doctor, I'm saying whether you have communicated with the trade, is your standard so difficult to measure up to, and the devices cannot be brought in? Well, at the moment they don't have the regulation. So what Mr. Xiu and Dr. Kwok and you are making assumptions. As a result of the legislation, will we find it difficult to bring in devices? Dr. Chen. Well, we are going to be aligned with the international community. Now, we've looked at all these jurisdictions in our PowerPoints. Some of the devices are used by professionals. Some of them are used in the household, and they can be registered nonetheless. At the moment, they may not have the registration, but given enough time, I hope that they will be sourcing devices that can measure up to the requirements. Ms. Mack, my question is, have you communicated with the trade? In our communication with the trade, some beauty sector representatives said that there are devices that can fulfill the requirements. Indeed, they have had communications. But what if the devices are not allowed in? Dr. Elizabeth Quat, do I have to make declaration each time we have meeting, or do I need to declare once? Different committees would impose different rules. For your own sake, I think it would be safer for you to make the declaration every time. I must declare, Chairman, that one of my family members is operating the beauty business, although I don't have any pecuniary interest. My question is, the beauty sector is concerned that you are trying to regulate the devices to make sure to ensure quality, that would be acceptable. The beauty salons are not the importers. The importers are more aware of what devices are good enough. The beauty salons are concerned about the availability of the devices. 90% of the business would rely on the use of the devices. Without the devices, they will have to fold because they'll lose the business. My question is, have you ascertained the availability of devices for the micro, medium, and small and medium-sized beauty salons? And second, you are regulating the beauty devices. Earlier, in the government's proposal, all the medical devices, including the beauty devices, will be operated by medical practitioners or by someone under the supervision of medical practitioners. They cause a furore in the beauty sector because they will be bound to fold because there can't be so many doctors who can be working in these beauty centers. But that proposal was retracted, and they are concerned that the devices will be turned into medical devices. As the next step, these devices can only be operated by the medical practitioners. The beauty sector counter-proposed that the beauty practitioners should be licensed so that those who are trained will be allowed to use these devices, but you're not prepared to take this on board. That their concern is that the government is eroding the businesses of the beauty sector. That this is a sector that offers good potential for development, and we have tens of thousands of practitioners, and this would be a good opportunity for women to start a business. Now, we are concerned about the extent to which their survival will be undermined. Permanent Secretary, we don't have any means to quantify the implications. All I can say is to discuss with the trade and the importers. We noticed that in other jurisdictions, they also have registration of beauty devices. Some of them are used in Hong Kong, and they are subject to registration. As to the quantity, we don't think we would be able to come up with an answer because we don't have any requirements at the moment. In terms of supply, there is good supply in the market. We asked the suppliers, and these devices are available. Of course, it would depend on the market strategy of the supplier, and they would have to decide whether they will register them in the home country. Now, we will try to streamline the registration procedures so that they will be able to achieve that. Dr. Quat, Chairman, we agree that development and regulation should go hand in hand. On the one hand, we like to safeguard the interests and safety of the consumer, but at the same time, we understand it is important to maintain the survival of the business. There are incidents before that were caused not so much by the petitions, but by the doctors. They feel that they're getting a raw deal because they are subject to all these regulations. After some wranglings, I think the government should face up to the real issues. Otherwise, it would be hard for you to convince the beauty sector, and their business would be undermined. You said you don't know how many there are, and you're trying to protect them. They are not convinced. So I think the government should really conduct a study that you've been talking with the beauty sector after so many years. You must be aware of all the associations and unions that exist in Hong Kong. You should be trying to ascertain the number of beauty salons and what sort of devices are being used. Come up with a table. It's not an an insurmountable problem. That they complain that you just poll a few companies and consider that representative. They find the report unfair. In absence of a detailed report, in absence of all the data, it would be unfair for you to take forward these regulatory measures that would undermine the survival. As much as we like to support the government to safeguard the public interest, if you undermine the business, and a lot of the beauty practitioners will have their job on the line, it will be difficult for us. Well, time is it's almost time to bring this to a close. I think we will have to dwell on this issue a little bit more before we move on to the QF. I hope that at the next meeting, now Dr. Elizabeth Quart is saying what we are trying to do with the regulation of these devices. You said you know what devices are being used and they would be regulated. Can you give us the undertaking that through the retraining board or through the qualification framework, the beauty practitioners would be able to undergo some training and be allowed to use these medical devices instead of doctors? Now, for the devices, like Mr. Alice Mack said, you are regulating the medical devices. And without the regulation, we saw incidents happen. Now you must understand that without any regulation of the devices, there are the problems that don't lie with the operation. I think the problem lies with the devices. Now, if the problem lies with the operator of the devices, then the regulation of the medical devices will not only affect people's livelihood, it will affect the business viability, it will affect the services that people are going to get. So what sort of balance are you trying to strike? Now we've gone past the time now. Perhaps you might wish to conduct some studies. Dr. Elizabeth Quart refer to all these problems. Now we have the representative of the trade in the shape of Mr. Peter Shield. Now, Mr. Shield, you might wish to get hold of all the documents and run through them with the administration, like the laser device. That they cause you immense pain that has to be operated by the doctor, I presume.
Well, I do have my facial from time to time with the machine. Oh. Well, if the operator is not a doctor, they may have problems. How can you follow up? Next time, hopefully we can get to the qualification framework discussion. Well, since they're asking him to do homework, then the government provided some information. Then how many countries or how many exporter that inside they are using licensed device in their country but exporting unlicensed device. So let's say they are actually manufacturing to countries without exporting requirement actually seems to export inferior goods. Sorry, we take a break and now. Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.